Today, Gaza Solidarity Encampment attacked by counter-protesters. Old man tries to stay relevant. Colin Jost fails at making rich people laugh. And later, Hikikomori has heart-to-heart with Chad anti-fascist Hasan Piker. All this and more on NSR NewsHour. Today's broadcast is brought to you by viewers like you. Become a member today and unlock exclusive content at patreon.com/NorthstarRadio. We start off our coverage in the United States. This is America First.
Now watch this drive.
Where we last left off, Gaza Solidarity Encampments were spreading all across America at universities of all sizes. These 100% lawful acts of peaceful protest were subsequently infiltrated and attacked by police, often dressed in full riot gear. Illegal arrests were made by the hundreds, and we know they're illegal arrests because many, if not all of those arrested were immediately released from jail. In Austin, after one day of protesting, all 79 people arrested that day had their charges dropped, as a judge for Travis County found most of the probable cause affidavits to be insufficient. From where we last left off, things have really escalated. Not because of the peaceful student protesters, but because of violent Zionist counter-protesters. Late Tuesday night and into Wednesday morning at the Gaza Solidarity Encampment at UCLA, violent Zionist counter-protesters congregated just outside of the reinforced encampment. Within no time, Zionist counter-protesters began throwing fireworks into the Solidarity Encampment. And for the next 4 hours, the brave students at UCLA had to fight off this violent mob while the LAPD was nowhere in sight. The Zionist mob used bear mace, fireworks, and handheld weapons to violently attack student protesters and try to force their way into the encampment.
We were encircled and attacked, and they started shining lights in our face, spraying us with very strong irritants, circling in particular one of my colleagues and physically harassing and assaulting her. And by the time I had finally managed to help get 3 of us out of there, we found one of us had turned back. And by the time we had looked back around, they were on the ground, being violently assaulted, and we were trying our best as we ran back screaming their name to pull them out of that fight, pull them out of the ground, pull off of them, and we were begging while they were flashing.
This was Catherine Hamilton, who was hospitalized?
Yes, she was.
Over the past couple weeks of these peaceful Gaza Solidarity encampments at U.S. universities, a total of 1,200 arrests have been made. Do you want to take a guess as to how many arrests were made Tuesday night at UCLA after a violent Zionist mob attacked a group of peaceful protesters? After 4 hours of defending their peaceful protest, LAPD casually walked in, broke up the violent mob, and 0 arrests were made. But people were arrested. It wasn't until the next day when over 500 LAPD officers raided the peaceful encampment at UCLA and arrested 150 peaceful protesters. The LAPD used flashbangs and less than lethal rubber bullets, which are capable of killing people, and 5 people were subsequently shot in the head. Not only are the LAPD running defense for the Israeli occupation, but they seem to be using Israeli special forces in this clear violation of the First Amendment.
What's up, guys? Aaron Cohen here, counterterrorism analyst, law enforcement instructor. I'm down here at UCLA right now. Have the opportunity to spend a minute here with LASD. Some of my associates. You can see behind me, there's a little bit of staging going on. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of the staging, just to keep everything nice and sterile as operations here are ongoing. Everybody here is ready to do whatever needs to be done to get this situation diffused safely. But again, LASD, this is the biggest sheriff's agency in the country, some of the finest deputies that I've worked with, and their capabilities, their tactics are incredible. Just want to say it's really important right now to support law enforcement. You know, these are the peacemakers out here, and these are the guys who are going to be risking their life to go in and not only pull those protesters out and protect the students, but we'll want to make sure these guys get home safely also. So yeah, down here at UCLA, stand by, I'm going to bring you guys some more.
Peacemakers. I feel like I've heard that before. Aren't those the guys in the Hunger Games franchise that violently cracked down on the starving, desperate people of Panem? Yeah, those are definitely the good guys in that story. Jumping across the country to New York City, the most famous Gaza Solidarity Encampment at Columbia University is no longer. Only a couple days before the UCLA raid, the NYPD in full riot gear, after blocking off several streets in Harlem, paraded their military toys through the neighborhood, headed for Columbia. Upon arrival, they broke into Hamilton Hall through a window and ultimately cleared the building of protesters. One cop accidentally fired live ammunition into the crowd of students, thinking he was turning on his flashlight. Real bright minds over at the NYPD. Immediately after the Columbia raid, the NYPD headed over to the City College of New York and raided their peaceful encampment as well. 300 total arrests took place that night. Protests, sit-ins, and demonstrations are still happening at both UCLA and Columbia. However, from what I can tell, an official encampment has yet to return. In response to these two very intense nights on opposite sides of the country, some of the wisest, most respected scholars, academics, and philosophers of our time came out of the woodwork to address the nation. Dr. Joe Biden, Dr. Tom Cotton, and none other than Dr. Bill Maher. Let's start with Genocide Joe himself. He made sure to go full 1984 with this one.
We've all seen the images, and they put to the test two fundamental American principles. The first is the right to free speech and for people to peacefully assemble and make their voices heard. The second is the rule of law. Both must be upheld. We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. The American people are heard. In fact, peaceful protest is in the best tradition of how Americans respond to consequential issues. But, neither are we a lawless country. We are a civil society, and order must prevail. Throughout our history, we've often faced moments like this because we are a big, diverse, free-thinking, and freedom-loving nation. In moments like this, there are always those who rush in to score political points. But this isn't a moment for politics. It's a moment for clarity. So let me be clear. Peaceful protest in America. Violent protest is not protected. Peaceful protest is. It's against the law when violence occurs. Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law. Vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest. Threatening people, intimidating people, instilling fear in people is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law. Dissent is essential to democracy, but dissent must never lead to disorder or to denying the rights of others so students can finish the semester and their college education.
Dissent must never lead to disorder. Now, he obviously said a bunch of garbage just now. These protests were not violent until the cops escalated and made it violent. In the most simple understanding, law enforcement has a monopoly of violence. They're the only people allowed to commit violence. However, in the same sense, they have full control over the levels of violence they encounter. Peaceful protest only turns into violent protest when said peaceful protest is subject to violence by law enforcement. Let's get back to what he said. Dissent must never lead to disorder. Joe, dissent is quite literally disorder. Nothing is given to the working class by the ruling class. They don't give out of the kindness of their hearts. The working class must always fight to get what we want. The 8-hour workday, the 5-day work week. These weren't just handed to us. These were violently fought for. Violent clashes between workers and police had to occur in order for the ruling class to bend to their knees. Dissent will always lead to disorder in a flawed democracy. Let's check in with the man whose name is a caricature of a Confederate aristocrat, Tom Cotton. Now, Tom Cotton is a Republican senator in Arkansas, but notice how his underlying message is the same as Joe Biden's. He's just much more vulgar in his messaging.
We're here to discuss the little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America, and the liberal college administrators and politicians who refuse to restore law and order and to protect other students. These little Gazas are disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate, full of pro-Hamas sympathizers, fanatics, and freaks. The terrorist sympathizers in these little Gazas aren't peacefully protesting Israel's conduct of the war. They're violently and illegally demanding death for Israel, just like their ideological twins, the Ayatollahs in Iran.
That's Insane. Tom Cotton calls Gaza Solidarity Encampments little Gazas, and then goes on to call them disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate. In a single sentence, Tom Cotton justified the violent destruction of peaceful protests here in America, as well as the violent destruction of entire neighborhoods of peaceful civilians in Gaza. Truly a vile, disgusting human being. It was so bad he was even called out for this on mainstream Sunday morning news coverage.
Can I ask you just 3 or 4 times now just used the phrase little Gazas. What do you mean by that?
Well, they call themselves the Gaza Solidarity Encampment. They're little Gazas.
I mean, are you... It seems like you're mocking the situation in Gaza.
Well, a lot of these people do deserve... These people do deserve to be mocked.
Well, no, Gaza. I'm talking about, Gaza.
No, on college campus.
We had the World Food Program has just now said that there is an outright famine in parts of Gaza. Tens of thousands of people have died. I mean, you're using this phrase "little Gazas,"
which is 100% the fault of Hamas.
Let's check in with a washed-up old man who's trying to stay even a little bit relevant.
Someone needs to tell the people who block traffic in the name of a cause, no one likes you. You have to be pretty dumb to think that the way to bring people around to your point of view is to make them late to pick up their kids from daycare.
That is the whole point of a protest. Protests are always supposed to be disruptive. That's the whole point. If someone's more annoyed by a blocked highway than a US-funded genocide, I don't know what to tell you. Protests are meant to get in the face of the public and inform people of issues they should care about, especially when those issues take forever to reach mainstream media or are put down and belittled by mainstream media. By the way, why is disgraced former CNN anchor Don Lemon over here nodding his head? Yet again, another left-wing media personality who is supporting the suppression of free speech.
If you really cared about apartheid so much, which Israel does not actually practice. Arabs there vote, they serve in parliament, they sit on the judiciary. Wouldn't you start with this? With the hundreds of millions of women in the world who live under a true apartheid, a gender apartheid?
The reason there are these fundamentalist Islamist countries that are putting strict laws onto women is because of American intervention in foreign countries. The thing these students are fighting against is quite literally the thing Bill Maher is accusing them of not fighting against.
Are you really speaking truth to power, or do you just think you look cool in a keffiyeh? Which is really just the new Che Guevara t-shirt. Another historical figure you never researched and so think is a hero, but was actually a sadistic, racist monster fighting for communism, the worst form of government ever. But these are small matters.
Putting aside the false claims of Che Guevara, someone who fought for African revolution against colonial states for the rest of his life after succeeding in Cuba, do you see the source they're using for this claim? They cite the Heritage Foundation, a right-wing think tank in Washington, D.C., whose mission is to build and promote conservative public policies. If you haven't heard of them before, you've definitely heard of their work. This is the same organization that is spearheading Project 2025, which is basically a conservative plot to reshape America into a fundamentalist Christian fascist state. They sound very unbiased and impartial. If you want to learn more about Project 2025, I highly recommend Leah Miller's video about the topic. She's a fellow Minneapolitan like myself and makes some great videos discussing law and politics. Bill Maher goes on to make a disgusting joke, poking fun at Aaron Bushnell, a member of the U.S. Air Force who took the ultimate sacrifice of self-immolation after receiving intel of U.S. military operations in tunnels in Gaza.
In February, a sad, confused man even lit himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy, and in his last Facebook post, he said, "Many of us like to ask ourselves, what would I do if I was alive during slavery?" Interesting cocktail question, sir, and I guess the right answer is myself.
Bill Maher claims that people are protesting for their own image and popularity, and then goes on to use an example where people are quite literally fired fighting for the safety of people other than themselves.
Last week, Google employees staged the sit-in to protest their company doing business with Israel. Their t-shirt said, "Googlers against genocide," but they could have just as well said, "Look at me, see me." And Google did see them to the door.
He then goes on to make an All Lives Matter argument, stating that, why are people caring so much about Gaza and not North Korea? Am I right, guys? Come on.
Maybe the question that today's protester needs to ask themselves more than any other is, why do I care so much about this particular cause? North Korea starves its people. China puts them in concentration camps.
For one, North Korea isn't starving their own citizens. The US is starving North Korea with sanctions. The reason people don't talk about North Korea more is because our actions against them aren't in-your-face violence. It's slow, starving violence that can easily be blamed on the communist government of North Korea. Alright, I've had enough of this bozo. Back at the Gaza Solidarity Encampments, some universities came to an agreement with their protesting students, but it seems a little fishy to say the least. At Brown, the students agreed to dismantle the encampment after the university agreed to vote on their investments in Israel in October. At the University of Minnesota, students agreed to dismantle the encampment after the universities agreed to provide full disclosure of investments into Israel, as well as a meeting with the student organization responsible for the demonstration. They've also agreed to a divestment resolution being presented to the Board of Regents on May 10th. From my perspective, this all seemed a bit too easy for the student protesters, and I fear the university may be bluffing. However, the student organizations agree with me and plan to reinstate the encampment if the university doesn't follow through. Down south at Ole Miss, a racist mob of rich kids with no drip congregated around a pro-Palestinian protest, and one man in particular made monkey noises and gestures toward a black woman. The man's name is J.P. Staples, and he's since been kicked out of his fraternity. Nothing yet on his status at Ole Miss. And if you think he's just an outlier, here's a photo of Ole Miss frat boys shooting up a sign marking the spot where Emmett Till's mutilated body was recovered. In other American news, the White House Correspondents' dinner recently took place, where politicians, celebrities, and journalists get together to celebrate journalism.
Genuine thanks to the free press. There are some who call you the enemy of the people. That's wrong and it's dangerous. You literally risk your lives doing your job. And some of your colleagues have given their lives, and many have suffered grievous injuries. Other reporters have lost their freedom. Journalism is clearly not a crime, not here, not there, not anywhere in the world.
Pro-Palestinian protesters gave the attendees a warm welcome. SNL's Colin Jost made an appearance at the dinner and absolutely failed at making old people laugh.
Isn't it crazy, by the way, that TikTok could be outlawed in the US by the end of this year? That's a real shame, because we're gonna need TikTok to document who is storming the Capitol next January 6th.
Now, I know the United States has been bombing Gaza for the past 8 months, but I had no idea Colin Jost would be doing his part in bombing the White House Correspondents' dinner. They also brought on this comedian impressionist. Kinda cringe for him to make an appearance. Now, I love impressions, but there's a right way to do it. I much prefer this dude who walks around New York City impersonating Trump.
Blacks for Trump, we call it Blacks for Trump. And nobody's done more for the African Americans than Donald Trump. If you look at the jobs, the unemployment, tremendous unemployment, and this guy knows. Come here. That's right. Come here. That's right. Come here, sir. We love this guy.
All right, it's time to see what's happening around the globe. It's time for global happenings. Over the past month, Gaza Solidarity Encampments here in the United States have been getting quite a bit of press. But it's important we focus on what these protests are fighting against: the American-funded genocide in Palestine. On Monday, Israel, along with Egypt and Qatar, proposed a ceasefire negotiation, without using the word ceasefire, where Hamas would release all the hostages in return for Israel releasing illegally detained Palestinians in Israeli prison, as well as a permanent end to the Israeli airstrikes on innocent civilians in Gaza. Israel apparently expected Hamas to decline the proposal. However, Hamas agreed to the proposal, angering Benjamin Netanyahu. However, Netanyahu is not beating the "I don't care about the hostages" allegations, as even after the proposal was agreed to by all parties, Netanyahu went ahead with the invasion of Rafah, urging Palestinians to once again migrate to a safe zone and not return until the operations have been completed.
Breaking news on a possible ceasefire deal. After word today that Hamas accepted a proposal, Israel's war cabinet came out to say that deal is far from acceptable. But still, Israel is sending representatives to Egypt to keep the conversations going. As CBS's Rami Inocencio reports, that's not stopping Benjamin Netanyahu from moving forward with his military operation in Gaza.
Breaking news this hour, very important breaking news, because an official Hamas source has told the BBC that it does accept a proposal for a ceasefire deal in Gaza. Now, Israel has yet to comment on that. We'll bring you more details on it as soon as we get them. Meanwhile, Palestinian civilians have started leaving parts of eastern Rafah in Gaza after Israel told 100,000 people there to leave the area. Officials in Gaza say Israeli airstrikes have targeted parts of Rafah just hours after that evacuation order was issued. Pictures we've received show thick smoke rising as displaced Palestinians try to flee eastern Rafah.
Let's just make this 100% clear. Israel has said time and time again that if Hamas releases the hostages, the war will end tomorrow. That's what pro-Israeli protests have been pushing with the slogan "Bring them home." That's what the posters all over New York City have been illustrating. The main emotional tie that Israelis have to this military operation is the fact that there are Israelis trapped in Gaza. And here we are. Netanyahu had a chance to return all the hostages home, and yet he continued with the invasion of Rafah. He's made one thing clear. He doesn't care about the hostages. He simply wants to kill Palestinians. It's even a well-known strategy of the IDF to kill their own citizens when they're kidnapped and taken hostage. They do this because they'd rather kill an Israeli than give Hamas a bargaining chip. Last time I checked, the United States said a ground invasion of Rafah would be a red line, something they urged Israel not to do, and if they were to invade Rafah, there would be consequences.
My commitment to the safety of the Jewish people, the security of Israel, and its right to exist as an independent Jewish state is ironclad, even when we disagree. My administration is working around the clock to free remaining hostages, just as we have freed hostages already, and will not rest until we bring them all home.
Oh, so it is a red line? But if they cross it, Biden won't stop sending weapons to Israel? Wow. It really seems like Israel has an incentive to stay out of Rafah. To add a bit more context, Western media says this military operation is to eliminate Hamas. However, from the perspective of an IDF soldier, their purpose for this military operation is to eliminate all Palestinian people, aka a genocide, because they don't see any of them as innocent, even the children.
IDF? Israeli soldier? How many Palestinians have you killed?
What?
How many Palestinians have you killed?
20?
Uh-huh. Is this like real life?
I don't know what is Palestinians. I know Hamas. In Gaza there is not civilians.
In Gaza?
All Hamas. Terrorists.
In Gaza there's no civilians, they're all Hamas? Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Okay. So the 1 million kids in Gaza, they're Hamas?
Yeah.
What's up, man? Where are you from?
Israel.
Did you serve in the IDF?
Yes, and I'm proud of it.
How many Palestinians have you?
I don't know, 20, 50. I don't count. We are gonna disappear Gaza Strip. This is gonna be crazy. You have to see that, okay? Enjoy with us.
Have you ever killed a Palestinian child?
No. One child? No. Oh my, 5. One child. I'm looking like a noob to you. You think I will kill one child? I can 5, 10.
I was on a bike ride the other day near the University of Minnesota campus, and I stumbled upon an Israeli counter-protest to an anti-Zionist Jewish protest. There was a small group of counter-protesters with Palestinian flags, so I joined in on their protest. After 20 minutes or so of pro-Israeli protesters getting in our face and calling us anti-Semitic, I joined in on a more casual discussion between 2 pro-Palestinian protesters and 1 pro-Israeli protester. The thing this man said to me was beyond belief, and it really shows their true intentions. He said to me, "These people are bred for terrorism. Bred for terrorism." I said, "How can you possibly say that to my face, admitting that Palestinians are violent from birth?" He then said, "Not from birth. They're taught to be terrorists. I then tried to teach him some historical dialectics. Why are these people violent? People aren't born violent, they commit violence as a response to their oppression. I tried to explain, America is the source of all their problems. Of course they're gonna call for the death of America and try to violently resist their occupation. But after 20 minutes of discussion, he simply couldn't concede to that point. And then this hysterical woman came up and started like berating me and yelling at me. And then she said like, how do you have an opinion on Israel? Have you ever been to Israel? Do you know anyone in Israel? Do you have any Jewish friends? And I said, yeah, I have a lot of Jewish friends. And she said, oh, and you're tokenizing them? To illustrate further how Israelis view Palestinians, here's a clip of IDF soldiers praying immediately before invading Rafah. But the tides have changed. Israel has never had this little support from the American public. Even the most non-political working class people are seeing the brutality in Gaza and especially at home. This isn't even a left-right issue anymore. Well-meaning working class people who tend to vote Republican do not like seeing billions of dollars leave our country when their small towns are falling apart and the only store in a 20-mile radius is a Dollar General. The world is rapidly changing. The internet is a growing trend, and the kids are using it in mysterious ways. Let's get social. There's a new phenomenon sweeping the internet. Grown men never leaving their rooms and hoarding fast food wrappers and beverages on their desk. This is called a hikikomori, and these people tend to be uninformed to say the least. One of these hermits goes by the name AsmonGold, and he is very against the student solidarity encampments at American universities. Luckily, anti-fascist Chad Hasan Piker has contact with said hikikomori and attempted to educate him on the topic.
And I think that also whenever you're talking about private property, people should have the right to decide what is and what isn't like private property. And I don't think that people who own private property should, you know, be at the mercy of the majority in a lot of cases.
No, that's
and
why that's why this is public property. Like university campuses, especially state universities, are public property. That's actually quite literally the reason why, for example, you know those Westboro Baptist Church freaks that go to like all the college campuses and like talk about how like yell at students and call them the F slur and stuff like that?
Oh yeah.
Like those guys oftentimes cannot be kicked out of college campuses for this specific reason, because technically it is public property that their tax dollars are paying for, which makes the situation all the more complicated and all the more egregious in terms of a violation of First Amendment rights.
Yeah, I think that it's really about the encampment in that case, right? Because the people that were there were really getting kicked out. They weren't really getting kicked out for protesting. They were getting kicked out for having an encampment there.
Well,
so
no,
if
they
the
were getting kicked out
Westboro
for protesting.
Thousands of tears later.
Wait, what? Is he dunking on the lolly guy? He's dunking on the lolly guy, right?
Because these people want to take things away from you because they think that they have the moral authority to do so.
Huh?
They're the exact same people that wanted to take away Grand Theft Auto in the 90s and the 2000s. I guarantee you that if we were back in the day, these people would be on the witch trials, tying girls to logs and seeing if they float or not. Like it's a tale as old as time. They'd be doing the same thing. Yes, they'd be in the 80s saying Dungeons and Dragons is satanic. It's all the same, guys.
What?
In other internet news, Kendrick Lamar murdered former wheelchair-bound Degrassi star Aubrey Graham after causing the most foul Millie Bobby Brown Freudian slip of all time.
Literally this? Kendrick, Drake, you're lying. I'm not attracted to Millie Bobby Brown. Kendrick, who said anything about Millie Bobby Brown? Oh, that's funny.
I'm not sure why Aubrey's house is full of alerts, but someone should let him know. His house may be the headquarters of some real illegal business. This has been NSR NewsHour. Join us again next week as we continue our coverage of washed up old men. All eyes on Rafah. Peace and love, and free Palestine.